Hello viewers, welcome to Kids Auto and Truck Repair. Today we have a 2015 Hyundai Sonata with a 2.4 liter. The customer complaint on this vehicle is the check engine light remains on the dash while the engine is running. The ABS light is remaining on. The electronic power steering system light is on, and there are some other lights that are remaining on the dash as well. So the dashboard looks like a Christmas tree. And then the other thing that the customer mentioned is the gear selector is stuck in park. When he steps on the brake pedal to get the transmission in gear, the shifter selector is stuck in park. So he has to manually release the gear selector by pressing on the button that's in front of the gear selector to get the transmission out of park. So to go from park to reverse and then drive, you have to manually release the gear selector. And then the other thing I noticed when I drove the vehicle in the shop is the gear display on the dash is blank. It's not showing you what gear you're in. So the display on the dash is not showing us what gear we're in. So the customer brought the vehicle to us so we can figure out what's causing all these issues. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go in the vehicle and confirm the customer's complaint. After confirming the customer's complaint, then we're gonna connect the scan tool to the vehicle to see what kind of trouble codes we have in the engine computer. So now let's go in the vehicle and confirm the customer's complaint. So as you can hear, the engine is running and there are a couple lights on the dash. So the check engine light is on, the tire pressure monitor light is blinking, the traction control light is on, the ABS light is on, the brake light is on, the airbag light is on, and the ESP light is on. The electronic power steering system light is on. So as you can see, we have a couple of lights on the dash. So right there. Now, one thing I noticed is you see this box over here below the gas pump symbol. This is supposed to show us the speed the transmission is in. So since we're in park, we should see P over here, but nothing is here. So it's not showing us what gear we're in. So this is a problem. And I also noticed when I put the transmission in drive, I had to manually release the gear selector. When I put it in drive, this box over here was still blank. It wasn't showing me what gear I was in. Okay, so customer's complaint confirmed. We have a couple lights on the dash. Now I'm gonna try to put this in gear. I'm gonna step on the brake pedal. So I'm stepping on the brake pedal now. I'm gonna press this little button over here. So our gear selector is stuck. Okay, so the gear selector is stuck in park. Now to get it out of park, what I did was I used this pocket screwdriver. I put it in this hole. So you push it in there and then right there. Okay. So right now it's in park. Once you put it in park, you can drive, but it feels like the transmission is not shifting. Now we are in drive right now. Let me show you the dash. So this is still blank. So we should have D in this box right now. So we are in neutral right now, and this box over here is still blank. So reverse. Right now if I reverse, the vehicle is gonna move, but there's nothing over here. Let's put it back in park. Okay, so right now I'm stepping on the brake pedal. Watch this, nothing is happening. Okay, right now the gear selector is stuck. So to release it, we have to use our pocket screwdriver again. Put it in this hole, push it down, and then there. So without this, our gear selector is stuck in park. Okay, perfect. So customer's complaint confirmed. I'm gonna turn off the engine. So now what do? How are we gonna fix this? We have confirmed the customer's complaint. This dashboard looks like a Christmas tree. There are a couple lights on the dash while the engine is running. the gear selector is stuck in park, we have to manually release the gear selector so we can get the transmission in drive. And then our gear display on the dash is not working. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna connect a scan tool to the vehicle so we can scan all the control units in the vehicle and see what kind of trouble codes we have. Hopefully we have some trouble codes that will lead us towards where the issue is. So I'm gonna get the scan tool connected and then I'll bring you guys back up. I got the scan tool connected to the vehicle. Now I'm gonna bring it up. I'm gonna turn the key on. I'm gonna bring up our scan tool. Let's go to scanner. This is a Hyundai. Since the gear display on the dash is not working and the gear selector is stuck in park, we might have some communication trouble codes because it looks like there's some type of module that's not talking. So let's see what we got. This is a little odd. This is taking longer than normal to communicate. The scan tool should have ID'd the vehicle. This is a 2015, it's a Sonata. I'm surprised that the scan tool is not identifying the vehicle. This is a dual overhead cam, GGI. Okay, so let's click OK. Let's do a code scan. Let's scan all these control units on the car and see what happens. Something is not right because this is taking too long. We should have read a couple of computers in the vehicle already. As you can see, it's not reading, it's not recognizing the ECM and the other control units. Now our dongle is connected. Okay, this shows me that our interface, the scan tool interface, is connected to the vehicle and it's powered. So we have power and ground at the DLC connector, but we can't read any control units on the vehicle. And I don't know if you can tell, the fan under the hood is on. The fan is running constantly. The fan running constantly, that can be an indication of a communication issue. So right now the scan tool cannot read any module on the vehicle. Let's go under the hood while this is still scanning. This is odd. Let's go under the hood. Let me see. Let's check our dongle here. So the scan tool dongle lights up. The light is blue. You see that blue light blinking? That means this scan tool module is communicating. But the scan tool here says that there are no systems detected. Let's back out. Let's do this again. Let's do a code scan. So while the scan tool is doing a code scan again, let's go under the hood and see the fan that's remaining on under the hood. The vehicle is fairly cold right now. Okay, it's not showing us the temperature on the dash. I mean, the thing is right here, so it's showing blank over here. So the vehicle is fairly cold. I just drove it in the shop, but the fan is staying on constantly under the hood. Let's go under the hood so I can show you the fan that's remaining on. Now, usually when you see a radiator fan that remains on all the time, even when the engine is cold, is an indication of a no communication problem. I hope you can hear the fan. So there is the fan. I hope you can hear it. The radiator fan is on constantly. So there's a problem. We have a communication issue. So now we need to figure out how we're gonna go about fixing this. Once again, I hope this is loud enough. I hope you can hear the fan running. Let's go back in the vehicle so we can figure out how we can fix this. Our scan tool did not detect any systems on this vehicle. According to the scan tool, there's no computer that's communicating on this vehicle, which is not true. I don't believe that, because we just started this engine. Although we have a couple lights on the dash, but the engine starts. And when we manually put the transmission in drive, we can move the vehicle. We should be able to talk to some modules on this vehicle. There are no systems detected on the scan tool. And then once again, our dongle over here is lit up, which tells me that there is power and ground at the DLC connector. So there are no systems here, no systems detected. Let's start the engine. So when we start the engine runs. I mean, we have a couple lights on the dash, but the engine runs. Now, when I rev up the engine, here's the other thing. I rev up the engine, you can hear the engine rev, but our RPM gauge is not moving. So the tachometer doesn't move. Watch this. I'm gonna rev up the engine. You can hear the engine rev, but this gauge over here is stuck at 0. Okay, it's showing us the fuel level in the tank, but no temperature and no gear. All right, so if the engine is running, it means the engine computer is talking, because the engine computer has to turn on the fuel injectors and it has to process the cam sensor input and the crank sensor input to start the engine. So if the engine runs, it means the engine computer is talking, is working, right? But why we cannot find any systems on the scan tool? Why is that? So tell me, guys, why? I'm gonna turn off the engine. So now what's next? So when I turn the engine off and remove the key, our fan under the hood goes off. We have confirmed the customer's complaint. The engine runs. There are a lot of lights on the dash while the engine is running. The gear selector is stuck in park. Our gear display on the dash is blank. It's not working. And then the fan remains on constantly as soon as you turn the key on. So the radiator fan under the hood, as soon as the key is on, the fan comes on and it doesn't stop. Now, when the engine is running and you rev up the engine, you can hear the engine under the hood rev. You hear the engine RPMs increase from under the hood, but the dash gauge is not saying anything. So the RPM gauge on the dash is stuck at 0. So what's the problem? How can we fix this? Let's talk a little bit about the RPM gauge on the dash. How does the instrument panel control unit know the engine speed? How does it know how fast the engine is spinning? Well, that information, the engine RPMs info, comes from the crankshaft position sensor. The crankshaft position sensor measures the rotational speed of the crankshaft. It takes that information and sends it to the engine computer. The engine computer processes that data and then puts it on the network. So what's a network? The network is basically a system that allows different control units on the vehicle to talk to one another. That's why they call it network. So the engine computer sends that information on the network. In this case, we're talking about the engine speed. It puts that data in the network, and any control unit that's interested in that information takes it and processes it. So the instrument panel is one of them. The instrument panel gets the engine speed info from the network and processes it and then displays it on the dash so that the driver can know what the engine RPM is. Now, since the engine RPMs is not working on the dash, that could be an issue between the engine computer and the instrument panel. And I believe that information is being lost somewhere in the network. And also, the gear display on the dash is not working. It's blank. So that information comes from the transmission control unit. The transmission control unit knows what gear the transmission is in, it puts that information in the network, and then the instrument cluster takes that info, processes it, and displays it on the dash so you can tell what gear you're in. Also, knowing that our scan tool cannot talk to any control unit on the vehicle, that's also a communication or a network problem, because the scan tool is not able to tap into the network so it can talk to the control units on the vehicle. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on the network. I'm going to focus on the system that allows all these control units to talk to one another. I'm going to look up our communication wiring diagram. We're going to see how these control units are connected to one another, because there are a lot of types of communication systems and communication networks. There are high-speed networks, medium-speed networks, and low-speed networks. And there are different styles and different types of networks. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to familiarize myself with how these control units are connected, and then we're going to do some tests. I believe whatever that's causing the fan to remain on all the time when the key is on, and whatever that's causing the RPM gauge on the dash to not work is related to everything else that's happening. Let's look at our network wiring diagram, and after that we're going to develop a game plan so we can fix this car. Here is our network wiring diagram. After I have put the vehicle's VIN number on my service info, I realized that this vehicle is a 2012, not a 2015. At the beginning of the video I said this was a 2015, so I was wrong. This is a 2012 Hyundai Sonata with a 2.4 liter GLS. Alright, now since we got our computer data lines circuit here, let's see what we're going to do to find the issue. Now this over here is the fuse box under the hood, and there is a good piece of information here that I really like. This tells us that one of our terminating resistors on the network is inside this fuse box. So right here, okay, we have one of our terminating resistors here. Now we have two terminating resistors on the network which have 120 ohms each. So the total resistance of the network should be 60 ohms, because to get the resistance of the network, we divide the value of one resistor by 2, by the number of resistors that we have on the system, because these resistors are installed in parallel. Now, the boxes that you see over here, these blue boxes, are computers around the vehicle. So these are control units. So our PCM is right here. This is the PCM. This is the AC control unit. And then on this side, we have the BCM, the smart key module, which this one doesn't have. And then over here is our data link connector. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn the key on and connect our scope to the CAN bus system. We're going to watch our voltage waveform on the lab scope screen to see how it's going to look. So I'm going to highlight the CAN bus wires. So over here on the PCM we have CAN bus C. It says C CAN low and C CAN high. So I'm going to click on this diagram. Let's zoom into this. So here's our PCM. So I'm going to highlight the CAN bus wires. Now as you can see, all these wires connect these different control units. Okay, they're all connected through these wires. So the two wires coming from the engine computer, they go to this splice, and then if we follow them, we will notice that they will go to a different control unit. So they go over here, they come to this little bridge over here. Okay, it's like a little junction, like a big splice, essentially. That's what it is. So then if you follow this wire, it goes through this and then comes out this way. So if we follow this, this is going to take us to the next page. Okay, and then we have this one over here. And then eventually all these wires will make their way back they will make their way back to the data link connector. Let's go to the next page. So right here, this one comes here and then goes here and here. So we're following this wire, then it goes to this little junction here and then comes down this way. Same thing here. So we're going to highlight this one, and then this one. So I'm just highlighting the C-CAN low wire, and then eventually you're going to notice that they will go back. Okay, these wires that we're highlighting, one of them is going to go back to the data link connector. So this one goes over here, this one goes here. If we follow this, it goes here and then here, 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 and then here, and then here, and then right here. Okay, if you follow this one here, it goes all the way back to the data link connector. So if we tap into pin 11, which is a yellow wire at the data link connector, if we tap into pin 11 and pin 3, which is a white wire, I hope you guys are following along, this white wire, we're gonna see the voltage pattern of our network. So let's go to the data link connector. We can use our breakout box. So we're gonna tap into pin 11 and pin 3 at the data link connector to look at our network waveform. I'm gonna bring out my lab scope and our breakout box so we can do some tests at the data link connector. We're gonna check our voltage pattern of the network, and we also have to check the resistance of the network. So the resistance of the network should be 60 ohms. So now let's go to the vehicle so we can do some tests at the data link connector. I broke out my breakout box and our lab scope is here on the driver's seat. So we're gonna connect our breakout box to the DLC connector down here. So here's the DLC connector. All right, so our breakout box is connected to the DLC connector. As you can see, the LED light on the breakout box are lit up, so we're good to go. Now I have my multimeter here too, because we're gonna measure the resistance of the communication network at some point. So now I'm gonna connect my lab scope to our breakout box. We're gonna be testing pin 3 and pin 11, okay? Because that's what our wiring diagram told us. So let's look at the wiring diagram again. So here's the data link connector on the wiring diagram. So we're going to check pin 3, which is a white wire, this wire here, pin 3 and pin 11. So pin 3 and 11 should be our CAN, how are they calling it? C-CAN low and C-CAN high. Okay, so if we look here at the PCM, so we're checking C-CAN low and C-CAN high, and those two wires should be pin 3 and pin 11 at the data link connector. So 3 and 11. So I'm going to connect my lab scope test leads to our breakout box. I'm going to connect to pin 11, and then we're going to grab our yellow test lead. So yellow one is going to come here. Now we're going to connect to pin 3, and then we're going to ground our lab scope. We're going to pick sensor ground, which is cleaner ground. Okay, so here's where we're connected, pin 3 and pin 11. Okay, so we should be good to go. Now let's go to our lab scope. Let's turn on the lab scope. We are on the voltage scale, so right off the bat we have about system voltage on the yellow trace. So we have 10.70 volts on the yellow trace and 0.02 volts on the green trace. So now I'm going to turn the key on. So let's turn the key on and see what we got. So the key is on. The fan just turned on under the hood. So with the key on, we're still reading 10.23 volts on the yellow trace. Okay, so nothing is changing here. I'm going to start the engine. So as you can hear, the engine is running. The voltage on the yellow trace went up a little bit. It went up to 12.47 volts, and then the voltage on the green trace is at 0.02 volts. So this doesn't look good. This doesn't look like a communication waveform. Something is wrong here. We probably have an open in the circuit somewhere. Based on the voltages I see over here, I don't think we have a short to ground. We have an open somewhere. So I'm going to turn off the engine. Now let's use our multimeter. I'm going to disconnect our lab scope test leads. So we're still testing the network. Now we're going to use the multimeter. I'm going to turn it on. I already got our multimeter set up on the resistance scale. We are reading OL right now. Now I tested my test leads off camera, so my test leads are good. So now we're going to connect to pin 11 and pin 3. I'm going to connect my red test lead to pin 3 and then black one to pin 11. Let's see what we have on the multimeter. I'm going to put our multimeter here. So we're going to connect this one. Now on a good network we should have a resistance of 60 ohms. So right now we're reading OL. So this is not good. It means we have an open somewhere. This is a problem. So what do? We have a flat line on the lab scope, a flat line of system voltage in one trace, which was connected to pin 3 of the data link connector, and pin 11 is showing us 0.02 volts. So what is the issue, guys? Based on the results that I just got from the 2 tests that we just did, using a lab scope and a multimeter, this tells me that we most likely have an open somewhere in the network, and the open can be between the DLC connector and the other modules around the vehicle. So we need to figure that out. Now, how are we going to go about this? Let's look at the wiring diagram again. So at the DLC connector, we were connected to pin 3 and pin 11. So now here's what I'm going to do. Because we could have an open somewhere here between these control units and the DLC connector. So let's look at the PCM. Let me zoom in to this one. So here's our PCM. So pin 60 and pin 77 are our communication wires. So secant low and secant high. I hope you can see right here. So what I'm going to do now is I want to go to the PCM and back probe pin 60 and pin 77 to see if we're going to have a good communication pattern at this control unit. Now, why am I picking the PCM? I'm picking the PCM because the PCM is the easiest control unit to access on this vehicle. The PCM is next to the battery and the connectors for it are very easy to access. So let me highlight these 2 wires. As you can see, all these wires splice up here and they go throughout the vehicle. What I'm going to do is I'm going to back probe these 2 wires, and then we're going to connect our lab scope to these 2 wires. We're going to start the engine. If we have good communication waveform at these 2 wires, after we connect to these 2 wires, that will tell me that we have an open somewhere on the network. Okay, and then we have to trace down some wires. And we can also do a resistance measurement at these 2 wires. If we have 60 ohms here, or 120 ohms here at these two wires, that will tell me that either one of the resistors is open or there's an open somewhere. So hopefully this doesn't turn into a nightmare. I'm gonna go under the hood. I'm gonna get access to these electrical connectors at the PCM. I know removing the plastic covers on the electrical connectors of the PCM can be challenging. So I'm gonna do that off camera so we can get access to these two wires and do our test. So let's go under the hood and do more tests.